I'm going to bring the meeting to order. Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to our public meeting of the Metrolinx board. We'll start today's meeting, as is our norm, with a land acknowledgement statement. Let's take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, in particular the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, and the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on these lands and has a responsibility to work with the original keepers of this territory and the many diverse Indigenous people living here today. We have many items to cover on today's agenda, including updates on ridership campaigns and results, customer satisfaction, and the initial business cases for Kitchener and Niagara Falls. Before we get into these discussions, I invite Ian Smith, Chief Operations Officer, to lead our safety briefing. And following that, Phil will discuss his CEO report. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so we're just give now the overview for safety, so if you can just listen for a moment, that would be really, really helpful. So everybody's safety is everybody's responsibility, but it's always great looking after your fellow people as well, so take that in mind. So in event of emergencies, I'm going to be offering out roles for people to play, and when I mention their names, I'd like them to stand up and say hi. So, in event of emergency, Matthew, can you call 911 so everybody knows who you are? Thank you very much. Jennifer, escort emergency services to the meeting room. Thank you. And our first aider today will be Vesna. Hello over there, Vesna. Okay, now the first aid kit, automated external defibrillator, and nearest fire extinguisher are located in the kitchen, which is just where you came in at the boardroom. If the emergency alarm goes off and resembles a slow ringing bell, everybody should remain calm and await further instructions. If the alarm is fast and loud, emergency evacuation procedures will then begin. Everybody is to leave the meeting area in a calm and orderly fashion, make their way down the main staircase to the ground floor and exit the building onto Front Street West. The elevator will not be operating. Once outside, all individuals should make their way to the designated assembly area located on the west side of the Fairmont Royal York Hotel along the east sidewalk of York Street, where a head count will be conducted. Now, as there's a lot of people in the room here, can you just look to your left and to your right and just recall the person you're next to? So, should we have to be evacuated downstairs, look out for your colleague, look out for your buddy, and thereby we will make sure that everybody who's out of the room is out of the room. Right, I just want to share a safety moment for a moment. As you know from here before, we take a lot of, actually I think a fair bit of pride in this actually, in teaching first aid and raising awareness of what we can do when people are ill or poorly or need our attention. I'm going to give you one here that happened at our Steep Rock depot. It's one of our bus depots, only this Wednesday. There was about a 50-minute wait where an employee, a colleague, had gone missing, and people didn't know where the colleague had gone, and that caused the supervisor to be somewhat concerned. So a search was done of the building, and the person was found in the driver's quiet room, and the person was barely responding. Just as we've just gone through the list of things we've said here, somebody called EMS, first aid was checked in terms of checking for vital signs, and the person was then kept warm and making sure they could still breathe effectively until EMS arrived. I'm very pleased to say EMS came, worked with our colleague who was poorly, and it's a success story at the end. But that was really, for me, a great example of how just people are really taking safety seriously, but also looking out for each other, and for that I commend it. Thank you.
Phil, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a very active and a productive period for us at Metrolinx since we last met. During the last period, we have officially announced Mobilinx as the winning bidder for the Horontero LRT project. Mobilinx will design, build, finance, operate and maintain this fantastic new project in Mississauga and in Brampton for the next 30 years. Our subway program also took a substantial step forward Toronto City Council officially supporting the province's subway plan. It's full speed ahead now as we work on these transformation projects. During this last period, since our last open board meeting, we've also transferred these projects to our own teams and integrated them in our governance structure and our way of working. And I'm glad to say that our recruitment of employees from both York and from TTC has also been extremely successful. We continue to work extremely closely with the TTC and with York Region, and they are real colleagues, very important colleagues and great partners in this endeavor. Overnight on November the 2nd, we held a full-scale emergency management exercise at Union Station. I was there personally for large parts of the night. It was fantastic to see the cross-functional and cross-organizational teams, of whom we have some people here we will recognize today, to work together to figure out how do we do command and control and how do we respond to these incidents. Toronto Paramedic Services, Toronto Police, Fire Services, City of Toronto, St. John's Ambulance, everyone was present and made a fantastic exercise. More than 150 volunteers and actors were at the exercise, and some of the injuries were really horrific in terms of it's demonstrable, even though they weren't real, but very realistic and making it chillingly real during the exercise. That was 150 volunteers. Another equivalent number of professionals that deal with situations like that were involved in the exercise, making this the biggest rail transit exercise in Canada ever held. And we're very proud of that. And members of our safety team will present that later in the open section. Our capital projects program, which will deliver $4 billion worth of capital projects this year, implemented in our region, is part of our campaign to deliver the significant mandate that we've got. And at times, there's a lot of discussion about what the future would look like. And it's useful to just remember that it's happening. It's happening now, and we're doing it now. And I sort of, at every opportunity we have, we urge audiences to just keep in mind that while it's good to talk about the future, it's more important to do today what can be done today. And we are moving forward quite rapidly. Track installation continues on the Eglinton Crosstown LRT project, for example. We'll have 50% of the track completed by the end of this year. 50% of the track will be in place. 3 stations we use the mining technique on at Laird Avenue and Oakwood would all be done by January. There's also great work going on the Lakeshore West line towards Hamilton and Niagara. We replaced the John Street Bridge, expanded the Centennial Parkway Bridge, and we are working on new track and signaling infrastructure between Hamilton Junction and West Harbour Station. These are important building blocks that will allow us to expand our services to Hamilton and also to Niagara, which has been a fantastic growth area for us. It's very interesting. During the last week, see articles appear in the press about how house prices are moving in response to GO services that have been expanded into this region, even though the expansion has been pretty small recently, but a good start. As we reach this midpoint of our business year, we're also happy to report that we're seeing positive results on several key deliverables for our customers. We have substantially focused our energy in our operations and our Presto organizations on customer satisfaction. And I can share with you that the Go Transit and Up Express scores have consistently increased over the last year. In fact, Up's overall satisfaction, customer satisfaction rate soared to 91% in the last month only. And that is 91% of customers that travel on Up rate their experience either as high or very high in terms of personal satisfaction. And similarly, on Go, we've reached a high as well in terms of customer satisfaction on the last score of 83%, which is very, 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 very good for us to have customers that are satisfied. We're also improving our customer experience across the rest of the business. And our reduced minimum load requirement for Presto from $10 to 5 cents have been extremely well received by our customers. On top of that, we've launched an e-ticket, and the pilot with one of our suppliers has seen a significant uptake since July. And by the end of October, we had sold more than 50,000 tickets like this on our e-ticket platform. And this will allow us to extend our self-service offer to customers in the future. We will have more updates of this in the future, but focusing on what we've done on safety is probably the highest priority in our business. Rail Safety Week ran from September 23rd to 27th, and during that period, we continued to deliver our education program through our Operation Lifesaver Partnership. We also held Orange Shirt Day on September 30th. As a public sector organization, we have a commitment to increasing awareness of Indigenous affairs with our staff. We observe this day of significance through an information session for our employees and with volunteers handing out brochures to customers at Union Station. This part of the introduction, we do focus on recognition, and I'd like to take a few moments to recognize a few people in our organization. On November 15th, we said farewell to Greg Percy. Greg was our Chief Operating Officer for 19 years, and the last 6 of those was when he filled the role of COO and led the incorporation of GO into a wider organization that looked after UP as well. Under Greg's leadership, we grew our capacity and significantly improved our operations. Just in the last 2 years, we've grown our capacity by just short of 40%, something that we as an organization are extremely proud of. And during the period that Greg was active as the COO, we implemented the new Network Operations Control Center, as well as we acquired nearly 80% of the network we own today, and Greg was very often right in the middle of those negotiations. Greg, unfortunately, couldn't join us today. He's enjoying retirement. But it was a real pleasure serving with him, and I wish him well on behalf of our team. I say he's on retirement. He retired on the Friday, and he started a new role on the Monday, and that's Greg. Greg is irrepressible. You have also met Ian Smith, who did our introduction this afternoon. He's our new COO, and on behalf of the senior management team and the board, I wish Ian all the best in his new role. On January, George Bell, our Vice President for Safety, will also be retiring. George has been with us for 3 years, and we thank George for the contribution he's made. He's been exceptional. And I also want to use this opportunity to introduce Martin Gallagher. Martin, can you stand up, please? So Martin is our Acting Chief Safety Officer. Martin will join us on the senior management team and assumes the role and responsibility on an acting basis as we recruit for a permanent appointment. Thanks, Martin. The brand and digital marketing team continues to be recognized as a top Canadian advertiser, and we've been winning awards in marketing, which we are very excited about. Some of these awards even at the national level, competing alongside commercial organizations. The Go Bus Auto Show activation and Kids Go Free advertising both won bronze awards with the Advertising and Design Club of Canada. And we're very proud of that. And the Go Bus Auto Show business case contributed to the Silver Agency of the Year award for our agency of record. And I want to congratulate Mark Childs and his team. This is stunning, and we're hoping for more trophies as the Auto Show campaign is running at 3 more award shows, and hopefully we'll win more of those. As I mentioned earlier, we undertook this emergency exercise, and it was designed to test our response time systems and protocol in the event of an actual event. I want to say a big thank you to all our staff, volunteers, and key partners. And at this time, I'd like to say congratulations and thank you for the work done by, and I'd just like people to stand, if you don't mind, just for recognition. Anna MP. Hi, Anna. Jose Camacho. Hi, Jose. And Micheline Chow. Thomas Finley. James Rogers from Toronto Paramedic Services. Hiya, James. Dan Sell. Dan Sell was not here, but he was good. Thank you very much for your incredible work in coordinating this exercise. Much appreciated. I now invite Albert Taylor, our Senior Legal Counsel and Corporate Secretary, to conduct the appointment of officers.
Thank you.
I'll be very
Over to you,
brief.
Rebel.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. We're looking for a board resolution to formalize the appointment of Ian Smith as our Chief Operating Officer, as just described by Phil.
So moved.
Seconder? Thanks, Leo. Any questions, comments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, unanimous, thank you. Okay, the next item is a report on ridership and the ridership campaign update. Ken and Leslie.
Good afternoon. So if it's good afternoon, board and chair. If it's all right with you, we're going to take the material as read and jump right in.
Please do.
So the first thing I wanted to call it is that when we start to show growth numbers, the number one question we get is why? What's contributing to this growth? And what we can say is really three things are contributing to the growth. The new services that we've added in the past year. So what we're doing is we're adding and we're filling in gaps in the network, so allowing people to connect to where they want to go more frequently. We're extending existing trips so they can go further on existing trips, which is a lower cost they go. We've also made changes to the concessions. So kids are now able to ride free on the network. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. And we've also changed some fares. We introduced a lower base fare. All of these are contributing to some of the numbers that we're seeing. So to put those numbers in perspective, I think on the first page we did ourselves a bit of a disservice. We talked about growth of 12.4%. That's actually an increase in growth of 12.4%. We were growing last year at 11.4%. Now we're growing at 24% in those short distance trips, which if you think about it, any private sector company I think would give their left arm for that type of growth. It's extremely strong growth, and we contribute that to that combination of events. The kids go free, the 4.1% that I shared, that actually doesn't include kids because we no longer capture that revenue. So once we factor kids back in, our growth is actually sitting at 5%. So it's, I think, an even stronger number and a testament to some of the work that's being done so far. And I'm going to leave it at that because I think in order for these services to be successful, we have to let customers know about them. In order for them to know about them, we have to have the right campaigns in place. So at this point, I'm going to pass the baton to Leslie and let her tell you all the great things we're doing to let customers know.
Thank you very much. We are seeing this momentum of increased Go ridership month over month, and I can really attribute it to the effectiveness of both our strategy, our make time strategy for Go, but also the team behind the scenes who is executing against this strategy. They're entirely dedicated and passionate, and they're thrilled to see these results, as we all are. Transit is an emotional category. And to help connect with customers, we had to reposition Go with a more youthful focus and tone. And that new tone and emotional connection was kickstarted at the beginning of this year at the auto show in February. We had an MCI bus on the floor of the show, and we released a 60-second video to the media in advance. Social media picked up on it. We got a lot of engagement, a lot of love. And with that result, we have over 1.2 million views on YouTube, and we were seeing brand love for Go for the first time in a while of its 52 years. So we, and based on that result, it's a case study that shows that the bus ridership increased 5.5% for that same time period last year. So it's not only just a cool video. the business case results behind it are making us even more excited. The Institute of Practitioners in Advertising, IPA, in the UK, analyzed what makes advertising effective. And based on 1,200 case studies and field research, it would suggest that the balance between emotional connection and also functional retail advertising, as I like to call it, the balance is about 60-40. You need to invest about 60% in emotional brand building for equity to weather the storms of whether that's on-time performance or delays or whatnot, to the functional. And the deck does extol a lot of our functional on-the-ground events and activations, C&E, Honda Indy, and we're paying that forward even in the fall, where we're partnering with Cirque, we are partnering with One of a Kind show. All of these things are important as a whole. No one individual thing is the silver bullet. It's the magic of all the pieces working in concert. So we are really thrilled to find out tonight if we have won a Canadian Marketing Association award for what we started back in February and what we are now considering like a snowball, rolling down a hill, getting bigger, gaining momentum. As the snow starts to fly, we want to wish the board a happy travel days. If you go to your Twitter account, the Go Twitter account or the Go Facebook account, or the Instagram account, you'll see that we have launched a video produced entirely in-house that is our bus, our MCI bus wrapped. And it's going to be on the road. It's going to be at holiday parades around the region, and to encourage ridership during months where we all start to hibernate. We still want those weekends to drive ridership during those classically low periods for us. So we want that snowball to keep up the momentum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? All right, thank you very much. I think Alicia is up next. It's e-ticketing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. The report provided to you today is an update on e-ticketing. It is for information only, and this is an excellent news story for us. It's the first time that we've had e-ticketing for Go or any type of digital ticket. It is a digital form of our paper ticket, so it is for infrequent riders and riders who are new to our system and see the barrier of purchasing a ticket as something that is stressful for them. They want to be able to pre-plan and have that in their hand before they get to the station for us. So what we've seen so far, we launched this in July, so it's very new, but we did see very large uptake straight away for this, so it is something that we know our customers want. We are seeing that seniors is a market that we hadn't expected are interested in this, and also event and weekend travel. So really supporting that hypothesis of the infrequent traveller being the one who wants this product. We're also using this as a test case to test not only for pricing options, passes, and things for the future, but also for our long-term Presto ticketing solution. So it's been fantastic working with the Presto team to be able to easily test out our requirements for that long-term solution. One of the key things we are seeing is events are driving the sales on this platform. We see a very heavy uplift in those weekends with large events like the C&E, the Santa Claus Parade last weekend. And we've now started to integrate this through our Go website, through our journey planning flow. So when people are searching for a schedule or searching for a trip plan, we're now starting to add this e-ticketing option in there as well. So people are easily able to click a button, get to their ticket, get it on their phone, and then get on the train. We've also added some in-station elements for this as well. So in stations where they may not have a customer service representative at all times, or busy times where there aren't enough ticket machines, we have signage to direct people that this is available for them, so they don't have to wait in a line. They don't have to stress that there isn't a person there to sell them a ticket. They're able to do that on their phone. What we are seeing too is that 43% of our sales are on weekends. We're getting weekly growth and exponential growth for this. So we are continuing to weave this into our agreements and partnerships with large events in the city. And it also means that we don't have to rely on that event to sell a ticket for us now. We have the complete control of that. So we're not in the hands of that event to sell our ticket and promote our ticket. And lastly, I wanted to mention the Santa Claus Parade. The numbers weren't available when the report was put together for you, but this is really a great news story. It's the largest week of sales that we've had so far. We sold 5 times the number of passes that we did last year for Santa Claus Parade. It was the first time that we tested with a pass product on the e-ticketing platform. And it is supporting that hypothesis that people want to pre-plan, and not necessarily pre-plan a day, a week, a month beforehand, but they want to pre-plan on the day. So they've bought their ticket before they get to the station, they can easily walk on the train, and it really creates that stress-free experience for them. And next, we're going to continue working on that and improving that product, and then continue working with Presto on that long-term solution. Thank you.
Alicia, and maybe Ken can answer this question or help with this question. We discussed in an earlier segment to what extent there was abstraction. We think the e-ticket is an abstraction from other modes that people would have used before, and how much of it is new business. And I'm not sure whether we've got that accuracy yet, Ken, but have you got a thought on that?
So what we've started to do is map out the growth of e-ticket as well as the... What we've begun to do is map out the growth of the e-ticket sales versus Presto sales versus paper ticket sales. And what I can say with high confidence is it's definitely not taking away from Presto sales, which I would say is our core customer base. When we take a look at paper ticket sales, we're actually not seeing anything that's giving us any early indication. Now, the numbers are very small, so we definitely need to get the numbers a little bit larger to be able to be confident with it. But at this point in time, I would say at minimum, it's a one-for-one swap with paper, but optimistically, I actually do think there's some growth net new growth that's coming.
Net new growth due to people transacting differently.
Transacting differently because what we're doing, and I think credit to the marketing team, is you're introducing the opportunity to take transit at the time they're making decisions, which for a lot of people is online. So now instead of thinking of a different way of getting there, they've got this option that we've made easy for them. So you're mixing two things that Go is known for. Easy, which is getting somebody there, and public transit, which is, I think, what a lot of people aspire to do. If we don't make it easy for them, it's hard for them to make the leap. So I think we're starting to connect those together now.
And together with the harmonization of our fare structure, which we'll be announcing in the months to come, we'll be having that right incentivization for people to either use e-ticketing in some cases and paper in other cases, and give more choice to customers.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else, Alicia, about e-ticketing?
Just in all of these partnerships that we're doing, there's fare revenue, we hope, but we're also getting some amount of revenue as well from the partners, for the most part, maybe not all of them.
I can't speak to all the details of that. That's one of my colleagues, but yes, there is a partnership agreement in place, and it's a combination of those things.
Well, I can maybe just add a couple of thoughts there. It definitely is combined. It's definitely a combined team integrated effort. So we're really sort of looking at 2 different types of events. There are events, such as the Toronto International Film Festival, where we're really sort of collaborating and sharing assets to build out a story and encouraging folks to choose transit as the easier, more convenient option. But there are those partnerships like the CNE, like Cirque du Soleil, like the Royal Winter Fair, where we're actually both vested in a shared outcome. So there is not only an exchange of assets to create the story and create demand, but also both looking to create the opportunity for folks to choose the fare option.
Any other questions?
Just,
Alicia, thanks for the presentation. I read the deck as well. But I thought I heard you say the pickup is with seniors?
It is one area where we hadn't anticipated a large pickup, but it is one area that we have seen. And that's really feeding into that pre-planning option that the seniors market we know want to pre-plan. They don't want to get to a station and then have to figure out how to use a machine or what platform to get to. There's enough to figure out, so they want to be able to have that already sorted before they get to the station.
And not having used one of these e-tickets, because I always use my Presto card, but all I do is bring my phone with me, and that's my proof of purchase?
Yeah, so you have a ticket that's delivered to your email, and then you activate that ticket 5 minutes before you're about to travel. So there are fraud measures in place with it. It's in line with our policies on our paper tickets, as well as what we do on Up Express for e-tickets. So it's a visual inspection by the Revenue Protection Officer, but it's all on your phone. That you don't have to worry about carrying anything with you.
You don't have to print off anything or whatever?
No, it's all on your phone.
Thank you.
One thing I'd like to add to that, because I think it's an important distinction, we typically look at the ratio of seniors to adults to kids when we're looking at the tickets. And I think the assumption historically, and maybe a bias that internally existed at times, was that senior people like paper tickets because they don't like technology. And what we're actually seeing is the proportion of seniors using this is actually slightly higher than people using paper tickets. So I think what it's forcing us to do is rethink how we go to market and rethink how we're looking at different segments of the population and stop putting people into buckets and actually treating people as individuals. So it's starting to be game-changing.
I think what's really interesting, and to just share this with the board, what you'll see from this and other presentations is, as we are implementing different fare structures, such as the reduced fare, and in Ken's earlier presentation, when you saw that 24% increase on short distance fares is a cumulative impact of many things, but probably driven by the base fare reduction of $1. Techniques such as this, it's incredible how much we learn and how we test the assumptions under which we understand the behavior of the different market segments around the 7 journey purposes that Mark and the team has mapped out. And the knowledge growth around how the market segments behave and where the market segment opportunities are is really excellent. And I think putting that all together helps us to be in that space where we offer the best possible product to the ridership out there, and I think it's a great progress we're making in this space.
Okay. Any other? Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Any other questions? Please, Luigi.
We're living in an era of connected customers and consumers. Will there be further evolution of this to, will you be able to e-ticket and then have coffee as well and know that your coffee's ready as you're arriving at the station? These are the kind of trends that are out there that people are looking for. I know we have a digital program that we're evolving. Is that the kind of thing that we'll be investigating over time?
The short answer is yes, but Mark's looking at me.
Well, actually, I think it's a great point you bring up, Luigi, because I think for our customers and residents in both Burlington and Oshawa, we have reopened the Tim's locations at the GO stations, and what we do know is that the digital way of ordering and getting an expedient cup of coffee before you board the train is absolutely working. So I think we're looking at more and more ways to integrate digital solutions into the marketing experience and the customer experience journey as well.
Thanks. Other questions? Thank you very much, Alicia. Ken? So our next presentation will be on customer satisfaction. Trish and Candice.
Well, good afternoon, bon après-midi. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first Metrolinx board meeting, so thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to spend a few minutes speaking about customer satisfaction for Go and App, and my colleague Candice, then I'll turn it over to my colleague Candice, and she'll speak about Presto. So hopefully we won't confuse you too much. So speaking just about the overall Satisfaction, thank you, for Go and Up. It's really a good news story for both. With Go, we have a October satisfaction rate of 79%, which shows a steady and consistent score above target for the past 3 months. So in my experience in customer satisfaction, consistency is the key, so very, very good news. And on Up, as Phil referred to earlier, we had a whopping 91% satisfaction rate for the month of October, which is just stellar. And interestingly, we also have a likelihood to recommend Up at 93% and a continue to use Up at 95%. So really some stellar scores and very, very, very well received by our customers and, of course, by us. On the Go side of the house, we are in October and the last quarter, we have significantly increased our service. We added 32 trips and we modified a total of 8 trips. And interestingly, the number of changes that we've implemented over this last year is over 1,500. So I think that's really great news for how much we're improving the service, enhancing trips, and really shows, I think as we spoke earlier, we are seeing an increase in ridership as a result of these very positive changes. Secondly, on November the 2nd, all the platforms at Union Station have now reopened after 10 years of construction. So a very welcome change for all customers and certainly for employees. So with all platforms open, we are seeing a reduced congestion and platform crowding, making it both a more comfortable experience for our customers and certainly a much safer experience for customers and employees. And one of the items that we've been doing more recently is we've developed a process, a repeatable, sustainable process to prepare and manage customer readiness for change. So we're managing both customer readiness and employee readiness. This process that we've implemented is setting us up very, very well for future changes which we have great plans for, and now we have a repeatable, sustainable process that we can use. So a couple of examples that I'd like to, sorry, I might have gone back on there, sorry, yeah. A couple of examples where we've used this process. Most recently in October, we closed for the first time ever the Lakeshore East corridor for a weekend in order to make significant capital enhancements, improvements, and overall maintenance. We worked very, very closely with all of our stakeholders, including the City of Toronto and other agencies, to search for the perfect date when there wasn't a Leafs game, a Raptors game, a marathon, or any other type of event. And we got there all except at the very last minute, a Bob Seger concert was added at the Scotiabank Arena. So nonetheless, we worked closely with all the stakeholders. We gave a lot of advance notice to all of our riders, both our regular riders on the corridor, but of course for our weekend and occasional riders, we used our media outlets, CP24, 680 News, and all of our social media outlets. So the result, and we provided bus alternatives for all of our Lakeshore East customers. So I shared on the slide just some of our feedback that we received on social media, which was extremely positive from all customers saying how well organized it was, that the buses were there and available. And I'm very pleased to report that no passengers were left behind. So no passenger arrived at a station and did not have a ride when they were expecting it. And we did, for Bob Seger alone, add one train at 11:45 p.m. to enable those customers at Scotiabank Arena to get home safely, and it was also utilized. So that was a last-minute addition, but we were able to successfully implement with the help of all of our partners.
And just while Trish is there, maybe Matt can give some comments around this particular practice of closing down a line as we've done on Lakeshore East. This is common practice. For the scale of the work we do, this is the first time we've ever done it. And the idea is to do this once, twice, a couple of times a year because of the essentialness to get work done.
Yeah, so we're putting a commercial model together that will go into live contracts and all our contracts going forward that are going to drive a commercial incentivization around people, our contractors, pulling a significant amount of work together during disrupted possessions, as we call them, or full closures of the railway. It's a very, very efficient way of delivering work, and we want to make sure that our contractors are thinking a little bit differently and really driving towards these sort of very consolidated, heavy-hitting weekends, as Phil says. 2 or 3 times a year. It's a fairly complicated model. We need to be making sure that we're incentivizing certain weekends and not others, and that we've got a functioning network when we carry out these shutdowns. But we've got a robust commercial model now, and now it's about operationalizing that model and starting to drive that behavior.
Matt, tell us how many different projects were achieved on that one weekend?
Yeah, 4.
34.
34.
34.
So Phil was mouthing at me. So, yeah, 34. Yeah.
34 pieces of work was done, 34 different separate projects, and it was a huge amount of work. And Trish, perhaps give a sense of the communications and the regime and the planning and everything that went around that, because that must be done every time around.
That's right. So we have a full work back schedule. So T minus, I think we were starting out as far as 60 days. Well, planning was well and truly on our way, but as far as 60 days out, we started our communications. And certainly in the last 30 days, there were onboard announcements on all trains on the Lakeshore East. And then we started to put signage up in Union Station, and all of our stations are particularly our larger ones. If you're thinking about Oshawa, Ajax, Pickering, some of our larger stations as well. And then we, on the day of, we had all of our volunteers and our employees meeting people or reminding people that the day before, particularly the Friday before. And then on day, we had people meeting customers at stations, directing them to the buses. And then we also used our social media channels. So our communications team helped us with some of our, and on the day before, I made sure, and I worked very closely with Rob Granitstein to make sure that all of the CP24s, the 680 News, the All Day, All News radio were making those continuous reminder announcements. So there were very large working groups, and we were meeting regularly, and then sort of really daily checkpoints right up to the closure, and then we had a subsequent meeting afterwards.
And all our disruptive possessions going forward will have this, we call it DWWP, doing works within possession readiness T-minus process to make sure that we're properly coordinating with all the necessary stakeholders.
I really want to commend Metrolinx, because not only did you get the word out, but and also on platform changes. I think you're doing a really good job in explaining why. So in the handouts at the platforms, there's always a description of why. I thought the video before this closure where the young man was explaining and saying, you know, all of this is for making it better. So it wasn't just it's going to be closed, but why. And I thought that was really, really well done, really effective.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. And not to mention your 34 projects, but also we took the opportunity on the stations team to do any of the maintenance that we needed on stations. So cleaning, washing, painting, all of the things that's kind of regularly need in terms of station maintenance. When we had the opportunity, we certainly took advantage of it to the best of our ability.
So Matt, you expect to do this, what, twice a year?
Well, no, we're setting a maximum number per line as part of the operating model. And it will depend on every line's got different quirks. You know, Lakeshore West, for example, there's certain elements of Lakeshore West that we need to keep open more than others, and we've got better diversionary routes around the network in some areas than others. And in areas where we can put diversionary routes in place, we can increase the number of disruptive possessions. So that the model really aims to nail down and drive down the disruption as far as it can. So I think we could be looking at 2 to 4 per line if we get this model right.
Okay, well, thank you.
I'll just spend a quick minute just lastly on the Up Express. We talked about it a little bit earlier, and we have made some improvements, particularly if you've recently been there on the display board. I think if you're thinking about that, when you get to the airport and you see that your flight is boarding, and it causes your stress level, or mine anyway, to go up to about 100% when I'm not actually at the gate. So we've introduced a countdown at our Up Express. So at 2 minutes, it starts to count down. It used to just say train departing, and so I think that would cause what I call the stampede effect. People were rushing to get onto the train, and they were not paying attention to the cues lines that we had set up. So we've recently introduced the 2-minute countdown, and we found that's helped significantly with the orderly boarding of trains. And then that was actually as a result of some direct customer feedback that we had received. So we're really taking all of that customer feedback that we receive, and then we're implementing the changes and seeing the very positive effect, I think obviously reinforced by the very positive score that we received in October. So that's it for what I had to say, and I'll turn it over to Candace to talk Presto.
So real quick on Presto, let me just go to that slide. The current satisfaction rate with Presto is at 76%. We're in the middle of fielding our deep dive survey right now in November. The early read on November, although not official, is that we are in the same ballpark of 76%. In terms of areas of success, so we focus on continuing to address customer pain points and deliver the pieces that our transit agencies have asked us to work with them on. So just wanted to highlight a few. As it relates to TTC, a couple of key things have happened over the last little while. One is the complete rollout of Presto tickets, so they're now available at all stations. And to date, I believe we have sold over 100,000 of those, largely single tickets rather than double tickets. Secondly, we have worked very closely with TTC and YRT to complete the Downtown Express and cross-boundary work that we needed to do, which effectively allows the customer to travel across a boundary without having to tap twice or pay two different fares. As I said earlier, we've reduced the Presto minimum load for in-person loads, so you no longer need to load $10 onto your card. 5 cents is what you need to load. That got us really great news in social media. So it was a great news story. We've seen strong growth in our self-serve channels, and the reason for that is because it gives people the opportunity to be able to buy a card or load a card in real time. As you know, the 24/7 wait time is a pain point for customers that we're working on. And the team continues to make a number of updates, but in particular, we're focused on working with GO, in particular around in-station and bus devices. And 905s to prepare for modernization. So that's the big rollout of devices that will happen by August of next year. Will be completed. We're in the midst of training and uploading those to the 905 agencies. That's the Presto update. Any questions?
No, sounds like none. Candace, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. Bill and Mark are going to talk to us on the emergency exercise that Phil talked about in his opening comments.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. You've heard a little bit about our exercise previously. We're pretty proud of how this turned out. We view it as an outstanding success, and we view it as a success not because everything was perfect or we demonstrated Metrolinx could do this flawlessly, but what we actually demonstrated is some gaps that we knew existed, some that were new to us, and essentially what it's provided us is tools to inform a roadmap for improvement. We committed to Phil prior to the exercise of introducing a series of drills every 2 weeks to practice command and control. You can only put an exercise this scale on about once a year. You've heard some of the numbers that were involved, but just to put it in perspective, I'd been hearing about this exercise, teams been briefing, I'd heard how big it was, but it wasn't until I walked in the Great Hall and saw that half the Great Hall was closed off, and there was hundreds of people, and it was just massive. So there's a real sense of scale. So to do this is a big commitment, but some of the lessons that were learned from the exercise around command and control and communications, we can drill those very quickly, and the plan is to create an exercise roadmap going forward. So this exercise taught, it informed, and it confirmed some of what we knew, and then frankly it taught us a couple things we didn't know, and that's the beauty of it. It couldn't have been pulled off without extreme cooperation of an enormous number of people. So the external partners, the volunteers, community college students, all the actors, enormous commitment from across Metrolinx. So it's more than just the safety and security people, the stations people in particular. So our team's used to going to big things, lots of flashing lights. Station attendants, not so much, and they were faced with something that's really, really difficult visually, and they just stepped right into it. In terms of, I don't know, is the video going to play?
Hundreds of actors and real emergency workers participated in a mass casualty exercise at Union Station Saturday night. It was a complex simulation that saw a number of dangerous scenarios, and it was all in an effort to be prepared for the possibility of a real attack. A disturbing simulated scene at Union Station. Actors painted in bloody trauma makeup, screaming and moaning in pain on Platform 3. It was all part of the largest emergency exercise ever conducted here.
So this is just going to be something I really, really hope never, ever happens, but we're going to test ourselves under extreme circumstances in one of the most critical pieces of infrastructure in the country.
With an estimated 300,000 people passing through the station every day, the goal of the exercise to test the efficiency of command and control centers and the reaction time of first responders in the event of a major attack. What looked like real wounds painted on an estimated 150 actors, and in order to keep the response realistic, only a handful of people knew exactly how the simulation would unfold. It started with a fake gunman pretending to shoot passengers disembarking a GO train. It took about 7 minutes for paramedics to respond to the scene, a dozen of them arriving to attend to the fake gunshot victims. Below platform level, more chaos. Actors scattered on York Concourse with various degrees of fake injuries.
Deep breaths. Deep breaths.
A large number of victims and emergency workers also filling the Great Hall. At some point, 2 shooters are taken down, but shortly after, another scenario is introduced. A fake fire breaks out on the platform. It seemed at one point firefighters were having trouble with their hose. Valuable lessons being learned, the reason they conduct these types of simulations.
And we actually learn how to make our processes better to respond to the real thing should it ever happen.
Not all of the actors in the exercise would survive. Metrolinx acknowledging it would be impossible to replicate an actual terror attack, but all in all, the drill ran smoothly.
So, if a picture tells 1,000 words, a video tells much more. I can tell you the scenes were so real that some of our staff were traumatized. We actually had to, for real, introduce peer support for a couple of the folks. There was a couple of casualties that really upset our staff, and so it was quite real. And the goal around the drills that I mentioned earlier is to create this organizational muscle memory so that we do this automatically. We respond very quickly and seamlessly. We jumped ahead to the media strategy, but in terms, oh, thank you, Mark. Back one more. I'm going to turn it over to Mark in a second, but essentially command and control is 2 sides of the equation. It's the first responders who attend these incidents, and the goal was to test our frontline people, our transit safety officers, and then more important, our leadership and our commanders and how to respond and how to interface with emergency services. That part of it worked really well. We established a unified command post, and that aspect of the exercise worked well. The other side of command and control is the Network Operations Center that has responsibility for maintaining control of command of the network and coordinating the broader Metrolinx response. And Mark Bailey's here to speak to that.
I think this is the 3rd large-scale exercise you guys have done, right? And I say you guys because you set them up. The first one was before our Network Operations Center was even built and commissioned. The second one, we exercised a certain amount of procedures and how we respond in the control center, but this time we took it to the next level, right? We learned a lot. We had, of course, the exercise was in exercise time Friday afternoon during evening rush, and it was actually at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And so we had more staff in our control center at that time than we would usually, simulating a Friday afternoon. And lots of work on the scene, like a very fluid scene, and you know, arresting the person. And of course, Bill always says that the first information coming from the scene is incorrect, and there's a lot of misinformation going. So at the same time, our team in the control center is making some pretty key decisions on the network, right? There's a whole network we need to manage. And for the first time, for the first time, we woke up the entire senior management team and said, within 5 or 7 minutes of the event, told them that there was a serious event, that this was going to be Union Station, there was deaths. Union Station was going to be essentially a crime scene, and perhaps more for a day, 2 days, 3 days, and we were going to have to make some key decisions. Of course, one of the big things for us is if we have a procedure, if we lose Union Station, how do we get this 100,000, 150,000, 170,000 people out of the city, which we've experienced in the past for power outages years ago, those kind of things. Or is this a decision where we shut down the entire network because perhaps the entire network's being attacked? Those are key decisions, right? And so I think we need to, as Bill was saying, we will exercise them some more, because although we woke senior management up and told them something was happening. We didn't necessarily give them the levers they needed to make those key decisions. At first, we were in the control center simulating running trains from, which we would do if we lost Union Station, from the Exhibition, Downsview Park, Danforth, the stations around the perimeter of our hub. But then eventually when it came to light that there was maybe a second attacker or a bomb threat or these things, Phil made the decision, shut down the network and stop trains everywhere. So that's what was happening from a network perspective, and I think you guys are getting closer to, I wouldn't say perfect, but what good looks like as far as incident command in the field, and we've got a little bit of a ways to go in the control center, including the next level, of course, is interagency communication. What was TTC doing? What does the Premier want us to do? Various things like that.
Is that something that you're going to include in future emergency exercises? Because I know, and I was personally involved in the Mississauga train derailment, and what worked exceedingly well was all the first responders were there and everything was terrific, but nobody sort of went at some point, uh-oh, this is going to be like a bigger thing than just a train wreck. And just to tell the anecdote, a radio reporter, who had my home phone number because I was working for the Ministry of the Environment, called me at 4 o'clock in the morning to tell me that Mississauga had blown up, which was a bit of an overstatement. But that's how the Ontario government whole system got put on, was me calling the deputy saying, I think we have a problem. And so when they did the debrief, it was like, who escalates to your attorney general, to your all of that sort of stuff was what really kind of fell down. I mean, everybody scrambled and it worked, but it was a really interesting key weakness of the system. So when you guys are doing this, are you looking at how we take it to that next level, as you said? Should we need a premier or an attorney general or call in the army or whatever the heck it is?
Definitely. I think this will enable us to do that, not at the same time as a full-scale exercise, but at the SMT table, perhaps on Wednesdays when they have their meeting, and then to run some sort of tabletop or discussion-based exercises. And you would probably agree with that. And that's part of the exercise plan for the next 12 months is to do more of that. I mean, it's hard to get people's time, but
well, and also the players keep changing too, right? So
yeah, definitely.
Success.
Yes, thank you very much.
Success is when we run an exercise without the Toronto police being informed, without the paramedics being informed, without the pre-information that circulates through our teams. But when Bill, in your build-up now, over the last 3 years, you've done a fantastic build-up for this. But when we get to an opportunity where we can run an exercise for a whole day with emerging scenarios and trigger people without warning, as it would be in real life, and then test whether the systems actually work, is where we're aiming for, isn't it, Bill?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
The idea of a snap exercise and exercises everything for extended period of time without any pre-warning, and you test that muscle memory. You test the training.
Just give an example, Bill, from last year to this year. Last year, for example, you didn't have as many observers. This year, we were flooding the scenes with observers that were taking notes and learning, weren't they?
Yeah, so there was observers that just other agencies that want to see the thing in action, and then we had a large number of assessors because we were really focused on the lessons learned this time. So we haven't conducted the fulsome debrief after action report. It's a big job getting that because we have so much information and we've done surveys. But the things we've identified very quickly, the videos that you watch talks about the fire department having difficulty with connectors. We've had the fire department back and we've addressed that issue. Another issue with the City of Toronto Corporate Security Department around a communications gap, we're not waiting. That's been fixed this week. So there's a number of things that can be learned, Phil, but the way the exercise was structured was not just to run the show, but to learn from the show. And I think we've learned an awful lot. The feedback's been very, very good. High praise from a number of agencies. The Toronto Ambulance Service or Paramedic Service is gone now, but They invested so much in this exercise, they actually stripped the city of service. And towards the end of the exercise, they were saying, we got to get the trucks back in the streets. They were short of ambulances. So that invested into this. So that was an eye-opener for me, that they actually diverted live resources to an exercise. But as they just said outside, they felt it was worth the investment.
Mark and Bill played a fantastic role in setting this up, and we're immensely grateful for that. But Steve, that's standing against the wall at the back there, Steve is the passion and the heart and soul of these exercises. He's like a boy with little toys. And so, isn't it, Steve? Thank you very much for what you've done as well, Steve.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah. We're just gonna. Do we also participate in or have the conversations, like for example, when there was the power outage in Southern Ontario in 2003?
Yes.
And I mean, the GO system was incredibly critical to being able to get people out of the city, and the coordination there. And then the other scenarios, of course, is if there were to be a terrorist attack, somebody would to blow up RBC or something like that, or a chemical attack under the path, because one of the challenges I understand is even if people all get out of the buildings, there's not enough room literally on sidewalks, and then what do you do with them? So I mean, is the city and the other emergency readiness groups doing enough of this, and are we plugged in enough that we know and they know, so that if something like this were ever to happen?
That's a great question. The answer is yes and no. So there are things going on. We have a fantastic relationship with the Office of Emergency Management in the City of Toronto. But by us doing this, you would not believe the number of calls we've received internationally saying, wow, we want more of this. And then locally, those that want to come and do their own exercises. It's recently, yesterday, I was approached by a major landlord downtown that wants us to support their next exercise.
Because that whole path, because I know when I was running the Financial Association, that was a real risk because there wasn't enough being done about what you would do if some of that stuff were
That's
to
who
happen.
approached us, actually.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
So Andre is going to speak to us about winter readiness.
Hello, everyone. Andre Lalone, Vice President, Transit Operations. I brought Rob Fuller with me in case there's any technical issues. I know there's probably some interest in this subject as well, specifically to the fleet and the fleet performance. And we all remember last year and the trying time that we had relative to our performance in the and the partial closure of the Up Express for a number of hours. So hopefully we'll be able to answer your question. Just want to emphasize that for us, as far as winter readiness, that's a year-round undertaking, and it's built on a continuous improvement and a Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. We want to make sure that we have the capabilities and the resiliency to manage the new norm, which is extreme weather, and that's not just snow, although that's a big part of what we do as part of our winter corporate winter plan, but high winds, extreme cold, and it could be rain, for example, and freeze thaw. So that's definitely an area that all of those variabilities are things that we want to make sure that we're capable of handling. And I'll just point out that we've just published, as of November 15th, our internal document that we provide as far as how we guide ourselves in managing those extreme weather conditions. It's got November 15th, 2019, and as of today, because we're continuous improvement, it's already out of date. So we'll make those updates. We just had a session this morning just to try to understand our performance as of last week. Now, interestingly, we try to bookend this from November 15th to April 15th, but we had a real winter experience on November 11th, and a couple years ago we had one of the biggest winter events, April 16th. So we have to be, in our ability to be resilient, we have to be resilient as well. So that's a living document, and it's continuing to be updated. So really what the plan focuses on, people, process, and technology, but also as far as the data points that we have and what we know and how we can then implement changes to those people, process, technology. And if you look at this in front of us, you can see last year we learned a lot. And I think we've made the investments and we made the right decisions such that it'll give us a better chance to succeed this year. Last year, we got the curveball we got was called the polar vortex. Our meteorologists, our experts say that hasn't happened in the last 50 years. And what we experienced that really hurt us and impacted our customers negatively was extreme cold for a prolonged period of time, but also with precipitation. And the precipitation was a fine particulate type of a snow that managed to find its way into areas that we hadn't seen before, and then obviously compromise those systems. So you can see that January is especially for the Up Express, is an opportunity that we took away, and we learned a lot, and I'll try to give you a sense of what changes that we've made as a result. Communications is the most important part of this, to be honest with you. I mean, it's great to have a plan, but if you're not communicating the plan, if you're not communicating internally and externally, you're going to make mistakes. So communications externally for us is very important. We have the help of the media. In fact, because in addition to trying to condition our customers and getting them prepared for the major weather event, we can put out messaging to them about safety, also getting them to understand that the service may change. We may make some adjustments, and so that's very important. And the media, they pick up on it. Snowmageddons, that kind of stuff. So we'll leverage that without a doubt, but we use all of our other channels as well. And then communications internally is equally important so that we can coordinate and collaborate, because the variabilities as it relates to what the event may or may not be, we're able to make better decisions. And so although we have within the plan, we have adjusted service called the Snow Plan, where we will reduce some of our trains, express trains, so we can increase capacity and reliability. We may want to, and that's a big decision to make, we may want to adjust those kind of strategies. And so this year is new, and we have the ability to do that. We also want to measure ourselves, and so we can benchmark and make sure that we are on that journey of continuous improvement. So there's many things that we're doing that are customer facing, but we're also looking at how we're measuring that. So for example, salt is one of those must-dos and must-haves as far as managing the winter weather risks, but we want to know how we're doing it because they have an impact. There's an environmental impact, there's a cost impact, there's an impact as far as the customers, what they experience. They don't want to walk through piles of salt on the platform. It also can have an impact on the infrastructure. It degrades our infrastructure, and it also can create on signaling systems, and so we don't want to see that. In Ottawa a few years ago, there was because municipalities it was such extreme conditions, they salted quite a bit, and they affected the signal system such that they acted in ways that they weren't supposed to do, and that made it onto the media, and that was a situation that we don't want to find ourselves in. On the bus side, again, for us, it's about being ready, being prepared, making sure that our equipment is fit for purpose. We are definitely making every effort for that for this particular years, and it comes down to making sure that all the equipment is in place when we need it, and that's everything from tires to windshield wipers. On the fleet side, and this is where I think we've done some things that we haven't necessarily done in the past. We've learned the hard way, unfortunately, that our DMUs, which operate for 21 hours a day, we're talking the Up Express now, apologies for the acronym, our Up Express train operates 21 hours a day, and we learned the hard way that in the wrong conditions, it won't last. And so we learned some stuff from that. We went and we made some investments. We engaged academia of the University of Western Ontario to give us some insight as to what the characteristics of our equipment is and how it interfaces with snow and ice, and remembering that in these prolonged conditions, that snow, it's just continuous, because it might be blue skies, but we're kicking up that snow, and it's collecting in areas. And on the DMUs and the Up Express, a lot of those systems are exposed in the undercarriage, and so we've made modifications to that, as well as the fleet doors. Everybody knows that doors can really be painful. And we've learned a lot over the years, but this year we learned a lot more, and we've made some investments there as far as the sealants around there and trace heating in the critical operating areas. So we didn't have to do before because we didn't experience those kind of failures.
Maybe Rob is our fleet specialist. Rob, give a sense there of just all of the intricate niceties of door seals and the like.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that Western helped us with. We took them down a model train. They put it through a 3D printer because it wasn't big enough. They made it bigger, and they used smoke and wind and things to blow around the train to show and demonstrate how the wind was going to curl up, or the snow was going to curl up and get in through the door seals. The doors had a seal on them, but it wasn't sufficient enough for the type of snow. The snow was penetrating through the door seals, so the adjustments are very critical, and the type of seal. So we've gone to what we call a P seal now, which is basically a round seal that fits into a gap and tightens together. So what we had going on, and we have door pocket heaters that are inside there that help if there's a little bit of snow egress, then it will melt it out. What we found last year, we melted the snow only to turn them into blocks of ice, so when the doors opened, the doors froze open. Pretty hard to move a train when the doors are all open. So our new door systems are such that they have a great draw open, but they tend to not have the same push to come back to close. So we've done a lot of work on that, and Andre was talking about the heat around the edges. If you've seen the doors, the snow and ice starts to build up and creep up the door. That also has an impact on opening and closing. So we've gone through, we basically tore this thing apart, and we used every thought and process. We were challenged by Phil, we were challenged by Andre and Ian to look at things entirely different than we've ever looked at them before. And we absolutely are coming forward with a whole, quite a new, there's 11 different modifications that are going on that started back in June that we're coming to completion, and all of them will be done by the 23rd of December. They're a little bit slow. I wanted them all done by November the 15th, but sometimes things drag on. Parts are typically took a little bit longer to get, but we are there. But we will go through this winter and we will learn again. So we are not standing on this. We're looking at how do we do that. November 11th, November 12th already provided us with some insights, and a lot of the door issues weren't weather related. We still have door issues, which one of the things that keeps me up at night is that. But from that perspective, we did a good job of we have seen a very good improvement on what happened after November 11th, 12th. Not going to hang our hat on those 2 days, but we certainly will go forward from there.
What we'll do with that is we'll measure everything that's possible, and that will then end up on their visualization management control boards. And so we'll look at that, and we'll look at performance, and we'll measure ourselves, and we'll continually look for opportunities to improve the resiliency of those assets. So today, for example, we just spent 3 hours looking at what we experienced, and we learned a lot from those 2 days. And so, as I said, this document will be updated accordingly. And we'll be making a presentation to Ian and his executive team in case there's any more actions that we can implement there. Question? Yes?
This may sound like an unfair question or a critical question, and I don't mean it that way. But as I recall, over the course of my life, we've had winter every year. Mm-hmm. And the GO system has been there for how many decades, right? These trains have been running back and forth. So what is it that's happening? Because the perception is almost that we're having more issues now than we did. Now, I mean, is it, just climate change, different type of snow, as you said, or we're getting so technical, we're forgetting to build trains with basic, functionality under stress kind of things? Or is there something going on here that I'm missing? I mean, because this is great. It's great work, right? And as a regular,
try? Yeah. Okay. Well, you go first, and I'll see if I can.
It's about volume of trains that we have out there as well. So you add more trains into it. So you're seeing more incidents because you have more trains out there. I have 73 train contests now that we run. Back when you were thinking about it, we used to, and I've been around a bit, so we used to go by an alphabet until we got beyond 26. So then we had to go to numbers. So we've now gone to numbers, and now we've continued to increase the service. We're at 73 train sets of different combinations. So the volume of trains out there are more. So typically you see more. It's much like being on the 401. You see more accidents, more
there's more cars, yeah.
traffic. So that is it. Some of the technology in regard to the seals hasn't changed until this year. We changed that. We looked at that ourselves, and we went back and we challenged ourselves, we challenged the manufacturer, we challenged other folks out there to look at and say, okay, what can you do differently to do something so that we don't have to do this? We've added electric door motors on the doors now that open and close them versus a pneumatic system that was there for years and years and years. So we have done some things, but when you do something, sometimes you add an element of, that didn't quite work.
Yeah.
So the doors, the electric doors absolutely will open.
They just were closing.
They're not closing for me right in the moment. So, but we're really optimistic that the things that we've done this year are going to make a huge difference in our service.
If we go back to 2 years past and one of the slides that we have here, you can see our on-time performance, and then you can sort of overlay that in the months. And then you can see that on the train side, we said that 94 was our threshold, but now we're at 95. And in that time, we've also added 40% more service. So we've acquired a lot of these assets over time. They might not have been in the best condition when we acquired them. We've been expanding, so we've been making our lives more complicated for good reason. And so we think we can measure that we've make these gains. Now, it's never perfect. And unfortunately, when something happens, when a delay occurs, we will be criticized, and rightly so. But we think that we have been able to make measured gains over that period of time.
One of the subtleties I think that's coming with the weather, Janet, is the fact that with trains especially, if you get beyond 3 days, beyond a certain point of what the train can sustain, it's very difficult to recover and to actually get it out into a defrosting zone, literally. If you get 2 or 3 horrible days and then still snowing, but milder days, 1, 2 of that, it allows the fleet to resuscitate. And it's all in terms of the circulation of sets through the maintenance facility so it can defrost. And the team has looked at all of that. But throughout the world, many jurisdictions, it's that 2 or 3 day window that the equipment can really sustain it. And then you get added levels of ice forming on the underframe, on the brake system, and you get to a point. And that's where, on up, you really suffered, didn't you?
Yes.
Last year, there was that point where we were into 4 and 5 days of cold, and the fleet just
And I think
said,
Rob
"Whoa."
we blame ourselves.
I think so. That's a weather pattern thing that is cumulative, and over 3 or 4 days, longer than 3. It's about 3 days, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah.
Yes.
And last year, I mean, we're not making excuses, but I mean, Chicago set their tracks on fire and was you saw that, right? That was on the media. I mean, those are extreme conditions. We should have done better, though. There's no doubt about that. We hold ourselves accountable for that. In fact, Rob and I discussed what the strategy was for the next day, the day we shut it down. We should have had that conversation 8 hours sooner, and we would have found ourselves in a much different situation. However, we're learned from it, and we're going to make ourselves more resilient, without a doubt. But we are sweating those assets. There's no doubt. I mean, 21 hours a day for that equipment. That it was, so we're learning from it. I'll leave it at that. So I'll just end, if I may, on maybe a couple of things that we're doing differently for this year, as far as what the objectives are for this year's plan. And we're in a position where we're able to do a couple of things that are a little different for this year. We are in years past, when we did an adjusted service, we were locked into actually making a decision by 7 o'clock the evening prior to, so that all of the resources were notified in a timely manner, and then we were stuck in that adjusted plan for the next service day. Now we're able to, depending on the level we're at, in a level 2 scenario, for example, we're actually able to then adjust the service slightly so that we can add that not resiliency, but that capacity, and actually put our forces in the right area so that we can dig ourselves out, and then make sure that our PM service runs very well. So that's new for this year. We're also introducing what I'm loath to call the NASCAR sort of pit stop, and but I guess it's too late. It's out there. So it's something that we want to do in addition to maybe doing a lighter adjusted service. We will bring in that fleet and we'll blitz it. We'll just swarm it and we'll make sure that it's ready, because that fleet, again, we're sweating our assets. Those trains need to be somewhere at 15:30 so that it can take people home, and so we have to make sure that we put ourselves on the right foot. The last piece, and I can see I'm being stared at by Phil there, is about being numerate and KPIs. We are struggling as far as KPIs, so we can say how we're reporting. I can tell you today we've got the benchmarks now, and we're going to be able to report on this, and then we'll be able to satisfy ourselves that this year we were able to perform to this level. Next year we're going to be setting big and more ambitious targets. So that's where this plan's taking us. That's a journey we're on, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone have any additional questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
Next up's Matthew and George on the initial business cases for Kitchener and Niagara Falls.
Thank you. Bonjour. So I'm Matthew Getsky, Acting Chief Planning Officer, and I'm joined by George Papafodis, who's our Manager for Rail Corridor Planning. So we'll present you with an update on the initial business cases for Kitchener and Niagara. So for a few years now, we've been trying to find solutions to extend service to these growing parts of the region. So there were some IBCs so I'll run you through the. There were some initial IBCs in 2015 that were drafted that studied certain options to be able to increase the service. Some of them led to examining a freight bypass, for example, for Kitchener that didn't get us to where we wanted to be in terms of the overall benefit-cost ratio. So this year we updated these IBCs in order to account for new opportunities generated by the GO expansion program, which was not fully fledged when we had drafted the initial ones in 2015, to take into account also the much better relationship and the state of the commercial negotiations with our freight partners that's enabling us to kind of co-produce things on the network. So I'll let, and then there's the new business case guidance just to standardize things and conform to Auditor General recommendations on how we evaluate projects consistently across the network. I'll let George run you through the results of both of these IBCs.
Perfect. Starting off with the Kitchener Corridor, and specifically Kitchener Corridor Overview. As Matthew mentioned, there's major opportunities and challenges associated with the corridor. I'd like to first start off with the challenge, and that being that section in blue in the middle, known as the Halton subdivision, which is owned by CN. We cannot simply run whatever level of service we want on that corridor. That being said, shifting gears in terms of opportunities, there's opportunities in terms of reaching our goals for stronger regional connectivity. And one of them being specifically in terms of quality and access to transit and transit services, in terms of supporting a continued economic growth and economic development along the Kitchener Corridor, which is also known as the Innovation Corridor. In terms of the business case results, two options were developed in order to address this challenge. Option one is the freight bypass, and what we're doing here is essentially building our way out of the problem by constructing a new corridor. Option two is a minimal infrastructure approach. What this, what this looks at is basically greater access and shared use of the corridor, as Matthew mentioned, and this is supported through a greater collaboration and our enhanced relationship with CN as a freight partner. In terms of overall performance, option one did have significantly higher capital costs versus the minimal infrastructure approach. Therefore, this is reflected in the benefit cost ratio, which is shown there, 0.5 for option one versus approximately 1.0 for option two. All this to say is that option two provides similar benefits to option one with significantly lower capital cost. I should note that the difference between the cost is approximately $2.7 billion. Another thing to note in terms of deliverability for option one, it is more challenging as a result of the length and size of having to construct a new corridor. It's also an important note in terms of option 1. Shifting gears and moving forward to the Niagara Falls business case, and starting off again with the Niagara Overview, it's important to note here that providing increased rail service to the region or to Niagara has been a long-standing goal for the region. A couple of interesting things that stood out to me about the corridor were that a GO Rail seasonal service has essentially doubled since 2013, indicating that there is demand on the corridor. Secondly, there's a lot of room to grow both our commuter and tourist markets in the Niagara to Hamilton and Niagara to Toronto areas. Existing data currently shows that there are a lot of people currently commuting to and from these areas on a daily basis by car.
Can you just clarify what you mean by seasonal? Like, are you talking tourists then, or are you?
So the data that's showing here on the graph is showing the tourist data. We have since increased that seasonal service to year-round.
Okay. I see what you're saying. It was only a seasonal service for tourists. I see.
It was a weekend service.
Yeah, I got it.
And it's about 7 trains that we used to run on Saturdays.
Now it's year-round. I got it.
Year-round. Year-round over weekends.
Yeah.
And weekdays, it's the morning and the evening service out and back.
Okay.
And that's not, the morning and evening service is not included here.
In terms of the corridor, I'll just quickly note that the corridor here is owned entirely by CN, known as the Grimsby subdivision. As for the business case results, the Niagara business case examined 3 options with varying levels of service. Option 1 had the lowest level of service, and option 3 had the highest. Option 2 came somewhere in between. We do this in business cases essentially to test a bookend of the service options to see how they'll perform in the overall business case framework. In terms of performance, and a few things that stood out to me that differentiated the 3 options were that options 1 and 2 essentially scored similarly across the business case framework, with option 2 outperforming option 1. In terms of option 3, it did have the highest level of operating and maintenance costs as a result of the highest level of service. Furthermore, it did pose the greatest risk in terms of operability, and specifically with the number of crossings over the Welland Canal on a daily basis, extensive negotiations would be required with the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation, who are operators of the Welland Canal. Therefore, taking all things into consideration, option 2, the medium service frequency scored best in terms of being able to balance everything, capital costs, operating maintenance costs, as well as ridership, and thus had the highest benefit cost ratio of approximately 1.2. I'll pass it over to Matthew.
So we'll open for questions.
Okay. Questions? Please, Brian.
This proposal before us is to move these two to the next phase of the planning process. And that planning process, I think we all recall, is the one that's now being amended and adjusted. What I've forgotten, though, is there any sort of public consultation at this stage, or is that after? I mean, local community consultation.
So there's no, I mean, the local community consultation, so we're working very closely with both of the regions on the scenarios, but with local communities, that really happens when we're ready for, if there are any needs for environmental assessments, for example. So that's, so at this initial optioneering stage, where we don't have significant local community consultation.
So if I lived in Niagara Falls, I wouldn't really know that this was going on right now, or?
No.
Thanks.
So you'd see the increase of it.
There's no extra track or anything.
So it's true in both. So they're both a bit different, but they're really mostly about getting maybe some passing tracks at some point, maybe some signaling work, things like that. But it's not any major infrastructure work. So it's trying to really optimize, and that's what's been enabled by the good conversations that Phil has led with CN, to be able to avoid kind of building a brand new track alongside the freight track and really optimize that infrastructure.
But the community messaging would broadly come once we are in the next stages of business case approval, and where there are announcements that the shareholder can take forward.
Yes. So today, so going back to that project lifecycle, we're in that initial stage where We found some good options that seem to make a lot of good sense from an economic standpoint, and then it's how do we develop them to get to kind of a less uncertainty on the costs and be able to present to our shareholder this opportunity. And this is when I think the conversations and the expectations can be made. We have to go through that, and also we will be running through that development phase in partnership with CN to try to continue to optimize these costs.
Thanks.
There's a resolution on this particular thing to believe it's option 2 in both cases. One saves us $2.7 billion. The other one is a pretty easy one to accept. And the second one, the business cases are fairly close, but the best one is the one with the 1.2 in it, which is also option 2. So could I have a motion on this resolution from someone? Thanks, Brian. Seconder. Thanks, Luigi. Any more comments before we vote? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. The last item before we take a break is on the quarterly reports. Is there any questions on any of these things which we kind of put in here as information? But if anybody has a question on any of them, please bring it forward now. Okay, seeing none, we'll take those as read. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to close the public session of the board meeting, and we're going to take a break for 15 minutes. So we adjourn. I will come back together at 2:20. Thank you.